Hello everyone, my name is Chai Hong from Malaysia. Welcome to the 21st Asia Oceania Congress of Medical Physics. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to share my presentations on fighting COVID-19 through the invisible light, UVC. These are the contents of my presentation. I will try my very best to share the overview on UVC within the coming 15 to 20 minutes. I'm sure all of you here are very familiar with this diagram, the electromagnetic spectrum. From the very right to the very left is the non-ionizing radiation to the ionizing radiation. We have radio wave, microwave, infrared, ultraviolet, X-ray and gamma rays. And our today's topic is focusing on ultraviolet, UV. Many people may not be aware that the UV spectrum can be further divided into UVA, UVB, UVC, and Phi UVC. UVA and B have been categorized as non-ionizing radiation, but UVC and Phi UVC they contains higher energy and they are categorized as ionizing radiation. And the naturally occurring UV is originated from the sunlight. UVA and B will reach the Earth, while UVC will be completely filtered out by the ozone layer. Let us now focus on UVC. UVC has a very important function. Scientists have found that UVC has strong germicidal effect, meaning that it can kill germs effectively, and the maximum bactericidal effect occurs at 240 to 280 nanometers. If you look at the dose response curve inside the spectrum here, the maximum germicidal effects happens at 264 nanometers, which is the wavelength of the UVC. So how UVC actually kills microorganisms? When microorganisms exposed to UVC in the range of 240 to 280 nanometer, it will be absorbed by the DNA, RNA, and the proteins. There might be two possibilities. Absorption by proteins will lead to rupture of cell walls and death of the organism. And if the UVC can go further into the DNA or the RNA of the microorganism, it will disrupt the replication process via a mechanism known as pyrimidine dimers, and the microorganisms are unable to reproduce themselves anymore. According to the FDA guidelines published just last year, the sensitivity of different types of microorganisms range from the bottom here, which is the least resistant to UVC, include lipids or medium-sized viruses, followed by vegetative bacteria, fungi, non-lipid or small viruses, mycobacterial, and finally bacterial spores. And the popular coronavirus COVID-19 belongs to the lipid group. Now let's look at how UVC is produced. As I mentioned earlier, the naturally occurring UVC will be filtered out by the ozone layer even before they enter the Earth. Therefore, all commercially available UVC are actually man-made source. There are several methods in producing UVC. I will mention the three popular methods here. The first method is known as low pressure, low intensity UVC lamps. Using this method, the UVC is produced by mercury at low vapor pressure inside a quartz tube. And this will produce essentially monochromatic UVC at 254.7 nanometers. Second method, using low pressure, high intensity UVC lamps. And mercury indium amalgam is used. This will allow 2 to 4 times greater UVC output and 25% greater lamp life. And the last method, using medium pressure, high intensity UVC lamps. And mercury vapor emission is carried out at higher lamp pressures and temperature. This will produce polychromatic UVC light. This graph shows the power distribution of the two different methods. The green spectrum shows the medium pressure lamp power distributions, and you can see they are polychromatic spectrums, so they have different wavelengths. Whereas the red narrow curve here showing the power distribution for the low pressure lamp. And comparing the two methods, the low pressure lamp is preferred because it produces a very unique wavelength and very close to the germicidal peak. Okay, let me explain it in more details. This diagram shows the low pressure lamp. The lamp contains mercury, which will vaporize when the lamp is lighted up. And the mercury atom will accelerate because of the electrical field in the discharge. And they will collide with the noble gas inside the tube and reaching an excited state. The excited mercury atoms emit almost 85% of their energy at 253.7 nanometer, and the remaining energy results in various other wavelengths, but mainly 185 nanometer. However, most UVC lamps used for disinfection applications are treated with an interior coating that prevents any vacuum UV, which is 200 nanometers and below, from being emitted from the lamp. And this is to prevent the production of ozone. Now let's look at the application of UVC. UVC has a long history of proven defense against diseases. The history can be traced back to 1878, when there was the first publications of effectiveness of UVC against TB, and this discovery has won a Nobel Prize. Later on, it was used in water and wastewater treatment and is approved by FDA and EPA. In 2020, the comprehensive IES reports UVC found to kill COVID-19. And last year as well, the Central Diseases Control in the USA recommends UVC as an effective method against COVID-19 mitigation. These are some examples of UVC applications. On the very left is the film hook, which is very commonly used in a microbiology lab. UVC has been used to kill the bacteria or viruses inside the film hook after experiments. And in food industry, UVC is used to kill the pathogens on the surface of the fruit to prolong its shelf life. UVC is also very popular in water industry, where UVC is used inside a water purifier to kill the bacteria and some pathogens. And most popularly used in aquarium, UVC is used to kill the bacteria in water and also to prevent the growth of fungus in the aquarium. Therefore, the UVC application can be categorized into 4 industries: food and liquids industry, water, air, and surfaces disinfections. Here are some examples of surface disinfection in rooms. This is our very own CT scanner room at the UAMC. And this is a portable UVC lamp specially designed to disinfect the CT scanner, the CT gantry. And this low pressure high output mercury lamp can be installed for a large space area such as office, operating theaters, even in the cinema or schools. And this is examples of air disinfection system where the UVC lamp can be installed on the wall, upper wall, or in the HVAC control room. And the air will passing through the UVC source constantly to disinfect the pathogens in the air. And lastly, we have UVC robots. It's so-called robots because it is portable, and some systems have the navigation system where the UVC robots can move around in the large space automatically. And what about the new norm after COVID-19 pandemic? We have seen more and more application of UVC in multiple industries. For example, in the airport, UVC is used to disinfect the trolleys. And this is another example of the creative use of UVC to disinfect the handrail of the escalator. And in aeroplane, UVC is used to disinfect the interior of the plane before and after takeoff. And in China and Japan, this is a big room installed with UVC to disinfect public transport such as buses after their shift. And closer to us, in the healthcare industry, healthcare-associated infections, HAI, is not new. It remains as an important source of morbidity and mortality. It leads to 1.7 million infections and 0.1 million deaths annually. The major source of nosocomial pathogens is thought to be patient's endogenous flora, meaning inside the patient's body. By an estimated 20 to 40% of HAI have been attributed to cross-infection via the hands of the healthcare personnel, either from patient contact or indirectly from touching the contaminated surfaces. Hence, hospitals required constant disinfections by multiple methods. Now we have covered most of the basics of UVC. Now let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages. The advantages of UVC disinfection include they are more effective than conventional methods in activating most viruses, spores, and cysts. There is no residual toxicity, no chemical addition required, no formations of disinfection byproducts, and therefore it is environmental friendly. No consumables needed, minimal operating costs, and minimal maintenance. The UVC lamps have a long lifespan of 8,000 hours, and even after 8,000 hours, the efficiency will drop by 20 to 25%. And in addition, at a higher dosage than required, the UVC can be used to reduce the concentration of trace organic constituents of concern, such as NDMA. NDMA is a highly hepatotoxic and carcinogen in laboratory animals. And the disadvantages include no immediate measure of whether disinfection is successful. We cannot see by eyes, and there is no instant measurement method. The UVC is harmful to the eyes and skin if exposed directly. And there's currently no standardizations in terms of disinfection protocol worldwide. Therefore, the effectiveness varied by systems or operating protocols. And the UVC beam has limited penetration, so it can only disinfect the surface which is in contact with the radiation. We need professional knowledge in the applications, and we need to provide training to the users. In addition, we need to apply additional safety control, such as the motion sensor, auto-thermal function when motion is detected, or the interlock system. And in comparison, it is relatively a higher setup cost, but in long run, it is more cost saving. Next, I would like to focus more on UVC dosimetry, which is a very important topic, and we need to. There are a lot of technical information that we need to be aware of if we want to apply UVC effectively. So the first equation here is irradiance multiplied time will give us the UVC dose. Irradiance is the intensity of the UVC, measured in watts per meter square. Multiplied time will give us joule per meter square. And the UVC dose is depending on the types of microorganisms and log reductions that we want to achieve. Whereas the irradiance is depending on the distance between the UVC source and the object surface. And here, the inverse square law applied. So using the inverse square law, the intensity of the UVC lamp, at the further distance away, will be a function of reduction of square. So I mentioned log reduction. What is log reduction? It is this formula, log reduction equals to log A minus log B, where A is the number of viable microorganisms before treatment, and B is the number of viable microorganisms after treatment. And this will give us the value 1 to 5. Log 1 meaning 90% reduction of bacteria, 2 meaning 99%, and so on. And what are the appropriate UVC doses to kill different types of microorganisms? There are a lot of references, guidelines that you can find from the internet, but I would recommend you to go for the reliable resources such as the International UV Association website, WHO, FDA, and the ICNIRP. And here is one of the examples of the recommended dose to kill different types of bacteria. I take a common example here, which is the E. coli, a common bacteria in the hospital setup. We need about 3000 microwatt second per cm square. This is equal to microjoule per cm square to reach log 1 reductions. And to achieve log 2 99% reductions, we need at least 6600 microjoule per cm square. And the IUVA has given a recommended minimum UVC dose as to inactivate virus as 40 millijoule per cm square. Okay, how can we measure UVC? Of course, there is a sensor and meter, that we can commercially available, and also there is a instant UVC dose indicator. But this is a very subjective indicator of the UVC doses, and they are not calibrated. Talking about the effectiveness of UVC, there are easily more than 10,000 papers available that documented the effectiveness of UVC in the inactivation of multiple types of microorganisms. Here I selected a few papers which are related to SARS-CoV virus. This is a review paper saying at 360 mJ per cm square, the SARS-CoV-1 had the highest UV lethal dose among 130 viruses from hundreds of published studies summarized by Kowalski. And this is one of the early published data on COVID-19 viruses, which was published in IEEE Spectrum last year. The top images here shows the COVID-19 viruses in the petri dish, and the lower picture shows more than 99.9% of the COVID-19 virus killed after about 10 minutes of UVC exposure. COVID-19 is a single-strand RNA virus, and in order to achieve 90% of viral reductions, we barely need 1.32 to 3.2 mJ per cm square of the UVC doses. This is another very popular paper in scientific reports. UVC irradiation is highly effective in inactivating SARS-CoV-2 replication, published early this year. The paper summarized that an UVC dose of just 3.7 mJ per cm square was sufficient to achieve more than 3 log inactivation of COVID-2 without any sign of viral replication. Moreover, a complete inactivation at all viral concentration was observed with 16.9 mJ per cm square. And also, there has been rapid development of far UVC since the starting of COVID-19 pandemic last year. This is another very popular paper in scientific reports documenting that far UVC efficiently and safely inactivates airborne human coronavirus. The study mentioning that continuous far UVC exposure in occupied public locations at the doses of 3 mJ per cm square per hour will result in 90% viral inactivation in 8 minutes, and so on. Another recent review of 80 papers on 1985 to 2020 mentioning that the efficacy of UV-based sanitizer technologies are promising, but are dependent on numerous environmental, physical, and technical factors. And the authors made a conclusion that the UV technology should not be utilized in isolation and should be considered as an adjunct to protocol-driven SOP. And there are various factors that can affect the effectiveness of UVC disinfection. Briefly, include wavelength of the UVC light, humidity of the environment, the surface materials, types of microorganisms involved, and UVC intensity, which can be affected by distance, tube cleanliness, and life hour, as well as the microshadowing issues. Okay, lastly, I will talk quickly about the biological effects of UVC. The absorption length of UVC in human skin is extremely short. Almost no UVC can reach the living cells in the skin, and all the absorption occurs only in the dead cell layers. Therefore, it is unlikely that UVC presents an acute or long-term hazard to human skin. However, UVC is likely to cause acute photokeratitis for short direct exposure to the naked eyes. An exposure limit has been set, which is 3 mJ per cm square by the European Health Agency Safety Guidelines. And for personal protective equipment, UV goggles or a full face shield is recommended. In addition, we should cover any exposed skin using lab coat, nitrile glove, or other lab attire. And this is the maximum permissible time for UVC exposure. With constant irradiation in the intensity on the skin must be limited to 0.1 microwatt per cm square. And with an irradiation time of 8 hours a day, the maximum intensity must be limited to 0.5 microwatt per cm square. And similar to the practice in ionizing radiation, the UV hazard symbol must be displayed at the premise when the UVC is used. And this is the ISO symbol. And it is always encouraged to add additional warning, okay, with description such as UV radiation inside, no admittance without UV eye protection. Thank you very much for attention. I'm happy to take any questions if you have, or you can email me in this email address. Thank you.